everybody. We talk so much here about finding our voices and owning them. We lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg this week. Her voice was like no other, and we miss her. We also know what she would want us to do. And that is to use our voices and to own our power. And so we knew the person that we needed to have a conversation with this week. It's someone who is doing just that, who is owning her voice and speaking up for women. Judge Jennifer Brunner was the first woman who served as Ohio's Secretary of State, and now she's running for state Supreme Court. And that's the opportunity we have here. RBG has left the U.S. Supreme Court, but we as women have the opportunity to champion women who reflect her values all across our country, in our states, and to elevate women who reflect her values to the highest courts. We vote on these offices. And so I'm just so grateful that when I reached out to Judge Jennifer Brunner over this weekend and asked her if she would come on and have this conversation about RBG's legacy, she said yes. So Jennifer, I just want to welcome you here tonight.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm so pleased to be here, and hello to everyone who's watching now and later.
So Jennifer, thank you for answering when I texted you this weekend. You were in the middle of course, this huge news we got of RBG's passing. You were doing what you do in life and that we can all relate to so much. You are a hands-on grandma. You, over the weekend, I understand, so I think your daughter ended up with a shattered ankle in the hospital, and you took over her 3 kids, I think, all under the age of 8. 8 and under, and you were juggling those grandkids and being that hands-on grandma. And so I just loved it. Like in between texts, you were like, yep, let's get this scheduled, hold on just a second. I'm getting dinner, So how's everybody doing?
We're doing okay. I mean, a couple of years ago, my daughter gave me a cup for Christmas that said, keep calm and let Mima handle it. And so that's pretty much what we did. My husband's a great help too. And we had the 3 kids, 1 girl, 2 boys, 8, 6, and 4, and almost 4. And then I took them back home, and then I work with them today on homeschooling because their school is virtual. So while the 8-year-old was working on her lessons, I was working on decisions for court and writing responses to media. And that's what we do as women, moms, and grandmas.
Totally. I mean, God, thank God for hands-on grandmas. So I know they're huge in our lives with young kids. So seriously, cheers to the hands-on grandmas out there. I know every mom watching feels that way.
Well, and okay, I did also put on a Batman suit on somebody today too. So
yes, love that. Yes. So speaking of superheroes, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I was really touched when I reached out to you about this because you immediately started sharing how she had really touched your life in personal ways, that it wasn't that you had ever met her. Most of us never actually met her in person, but the impact she had on our lives, I don't think we're all even aware of the extent of it, but you seemed to have an awareness really at a personal level. So first of all, I just want to ask, what was your reaction? What did you do when you found out?
I was kind of like, and I felt bad for her because I knew she was trying so hard to stay with us until a later time, and that it just didn't work. And I know that was disappointing for her too. But my campaign manager texted me and said, did you see the news about RBG? And all I could say, because I was in the middle of fixing dinner for kids, was yes, God help us. And that was my first reaction. But we shoulder on, we carry on. And, for me personally, I go back to when I was in high school, and I mean, okay, so I'm kind of old, and we didn't get Title IX. Okay, well, we Title IX was something I heard about like my senior year in high school, and I didn't know what it was, but all I knew was that I was allowed to run on a girls' track team, and I didn't have to be a cheerleader, even though I still was a cheerleader and I was working after school and busy with my studies. But I wanted to be on this girls' track team, and what I really when I look back on it now, and when I wrote kind of a little blog on it and I processed it, I realized that she did something for daughters and their fathers in helping them come closer together. My dad had been voted at his rural high school the all around best athlete in his high school his senior year. He got a scholarship to play basketball at Defiance and then later at Bowling Green. And but my dad's like major accomplishment was running the mile, and he held this record of the best time for the mile for decades, and it wasn't beat
Wait,
in
how
his high
fast did
school.
he run it? Do you know? I mean,
I don't know. I think it must have been under 5, but
oh,
it wasn't broken until after he died in 1993. So
wow.
I had run with him a lot
Powerful.
in middle school, and he was kind of hard on me because I'd be saying, "Oh, Dad, it really hurts," and he'd say, "Do you want to get better?" I'm like, "Yeah." We'll keep running. I'm okay. And so,
Wow.
he toughened me up pretty well. But then when I got to have the opportunity, I wanted to run the mile, and he was my coach because like the school was like, well, we just know football, and basketball and baseball and maybe tennis. And so essentially they just had somebody step up who said they'd coach the team. But my dad gave me my workout every day. And whether I had time to meet with the track team or not, because I was busy, I did my workout every day. And finally, when we had like the first all girls citywide track meet, I ran a mile in 6 minutes and 24 seconds, which it wouldn't be Olympic or anything, but it was good for back then. And my dad was
Oh
just like,
no, that's good
so,
for right now. Like,
my,
I
my,
mean,
well, I
I've
was,
never run a mile that fast. Let's be honest. Any ladies out there run a mile that fast?
oh, I'm
Probably
sure there
very
are
few.
plenty, but my dad was like so excited, and it created this bond for us that, he died only 18 years later. And I think if it hadn't been for her, like we couldn't have had that really critical thing that was important to both of us to relate to. And I mean, she would never know, how many people she helped in such unexpected ways. And then later on, when I was a judge on the 10th District Court of Appeals, I read her book in my own words, which is really all of her writings, or it's comprised of her writings from the time she was in middle school to the one of the decisions she wrote in 2016. And it changed the way that I wrote my decisions. I wrote them more simply, more direct, more concise, and you know always respectful. I always try to be respectful anyways, but so she's influenced my life throughout my life. And
Wow.
she will never know it. She never knew me, and I never knew her personally. But I feel like as long as we carry forward what she stood for, the class that she had, the hard work she put into it, the way she did it, then her work will not end, and we'll basically carry it forward.
I love how you've personalized her influence though, Jennifer. I think sometimes people running for office, they think, just in policy, which is so important. And we're grateful for that work. But thinking about how Title IX wasn't just about shifting money from one bucket to the other, opening funds up that would, be allowed to reach girls sports. And okay, now that's equitable, but what that actually means, in people's lives and how that can transform relationships, and for you to internalize that and then to continue to be influenced by her, as a judge, as an adult, I think is really amazing, and something I look for in my leaders, actually, because I think that what it signals actually is that empathy thing, right? Like that personal connection to issues and a need to a drive to do more, which is what she had.
And I really think for a judge who has, in terms of the three branches of government, and in terms of the discretion, the amount of discretion to use in the office, and that discretion really has to do with the freedom to make judgments, and it comes personally from within a person. Having that life experience is really important to perspective, to empathy, and to making the kind of judgment that is a great balance between heart and head.
So can I
And
ask you for a specific example of this? Like, I'm so curious. I've recently learned about how when you were Secretary of State, and you are the only woman who Ohio has been lucky enough to have serve in that role so far. Um, that
unfortunately,
right, I know. But one of the things I recently learned about is that you push for a law that protects the privacy of victims of domestic violence when registering to vote. This is something I think most people wouldn't even think about, that they would feel worried about their contact information becoming public by registering to vote, and then, being concerned as a victim, and, being able to be tracked down once again. I mean, what's the backstory there that saw this problem, pushed so hard to have it fixed, I believe got a law passed to protect these victims of registering to vote? What's the backstory there?
the backstory is that Ohio is so interesting because we're such a diverse state and we're like a microcosm of the country. So something that may be like run of the mill in California would have to be a pilot project in Ohio. And so there were a lot of other states, I think over 30, that had this in place. And, I would go to the National Association of Secretaries of State conference, and I had great staff who went with me. Kelly Pinkleton was the chief of my Voting Rights Institute. And I think she brought this issue to me, and I said, that's a great idea. Why don't we do that? So I remember we unfurled it, we introduced it at a press conference, and all these guy reporters went, "What? What?"
Of course.
And we're saying, "No, look, understand. This is not something crazy that we pulled out of a hat. This is something that's actually operated in states all over the country."
Right.
And it didn't pass when I was in office. It actually took probably, I think it passed when Secretary Husted was in office. First Kathleen Chandler, state representative from Ravenna, was championing this issue. And then when she was termed out, State Representative Kathleen Clyde picked up the issue. And finally, and I think maybe even with the help of Kristen Boggs, state representative, this thing was passed, but it took a while. And now, because they do this for police officers who need their privacy, their identity protected, and so why not for victims of domestic violence or people who are being stalked? So I'm so
Right.
glad to see that it's in place now.
But that's how change happens. And that's something I'm so struck by too, about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's influence and how she led. So much emphasis on lead in a way that really others can follow, create that space, and recognize that, the power in dissent. You saw a status quo, said it shouldn't be this way. Maybe I'm not going to get it fixed tomorrow because all these male reporters are just laughing and not getting it. And I've got an uphill mountain to climb. But eventually, and it sounds like you had a lot of other women who came in the wake and kept pushing this forward. Eventually it happened, and Ohio's better for it. And that's how change happens.
And really, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was strategic. And because
Yes.
she was strategic, so she realized, okay, my audience in the US Supreme Court is all men. So I have to take a statute that treats men unfairly for the men on the court to understand that it should be this way regardless. And so she was criticized for that because a lot of people, and I experienced this as Secretary of State, they wanted change right now and they wanted to plow it through. And I plowed through a lot of change, but I knew sometimes there were limits of what could be accepted, and you don't want to make perfect the enemy of the good. If you can accomplish the good and you can accomplish the good, you can take it in increments, and she did that. And I respect her for that, because it wasn't always met with open arms. Sometimes people were critical and said you didn't do enough. And so there were times when I was Secretary of State when I had people on the far right suing me. I had the ACLU suing me because they didn't think I was doing well enough. I had the Brennan Center at NYU saying this isn't good enough. I had Demos saying this isn't good enough. But you put on the hard outer shell and you follow your conscience and you do what you possibly can.
Gosh, yeah, it's so true. And sometimes just that arc towards justice, it takes too long. But if no one, you just got to keep pushing.
Right.
Okay, so I have a question about, we're now going through this, President Trump will now, of course, nominate someone that they will try to push very hard and as quickly as possible. And we all have to rise up and, push to let the people decide rather than politicians forcing something through, like right before we have this Democratic election. But there's a lot. He's expected to nominate a woman. And I've already been getting asked a lot, like, oh, okay, well, it's going to be a woman. So are women going to be happy with that? Or, if Trump nominates a woman? I mean, you've been pushing for women in leadership, Katie, red, wine, and blue, suburban housewives of America out there. What do you think the response will be to a woman nominee
Well,
from Trump?
Women we have some things in common, but when time after time over the years I've been involved in elections and campaigns, they're a voting bloc for some issues, but they're not the voting bloc that people think that they are. So if you go back to John McCain, his first presidential decision when he was running against Barack Obama in 2008 was to name a vice presidential candidate, and he named Sarah Palin. And I think he thought, oh, I'm going to just get this overwhelming support from women. And
Right.
It didn't happen that way. There were a group of people, probably a lot of people who like President Trump, probably like Sarah Palin. So, it, I hate, I don't know why the word, lipstick on a pig just keeps coming to mind, but if the woman
Her
isn't,
words, yeah.
if a woman isn't the kind of person who's, who, who's at least some women perceive is going to do and stand for the things that they want, it's really not going to matter.
Yeah.
Other women, they might like it, but I think what this really boils down to, more than woman or man, is whether this, what this judicial candidate's record is on pro-choice versus anti-abortion. And that's what people most fear, is whether Roe v. Wade will stand and whether Chief Justice Roberts will be able to manage his court as successfully as he has, in not being too reactionary one way or the other. He came in as a conservative, but he has moved toward the middle when he's needed to, in managing a decision that he thinks will work for all of the country. And I think um, that question of how conservative, and is it so conservative that Roe v. Wade is in jeopardy, is really the bigger issue, regardless of the gender of the person.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that when we think about who might be nominated by President Trump, we do know for sure that this nominee will be, regardless of gender, anti-choice. I won't say that this nominee will be pro-life, actually, when the first consequence, perhaps, of RBG leaving the court could be the dismantling of the Affordable Care Act, which has led to a massive reduction in abortions across America by creating free access to contraception, which will lead to millions of Americans without access to life-saving care in the middle of a pandemic. But I'll be interested to see how this plays out, the extent to which, kind of the old political lines, are drawn in this. I think that things have changed a lot among women in the last few years. There are so many women who have become activated, actually, in reaction to Trump, realizing how high the stakes are. Now with RBG's passing, it just raises the stakes even higher on all of these things. And the idea that he would nominate a woman that doesn't reflect the values and the issues that have drawn all of these women to engage in this process. I don't know, Jennifer, I find it pretty laughable. I mean, how dumb do they think we are?
Well, I mean, this is from somebody who, it came out in the 2016 campaign, got caught on a microphone that was live about what he could do to women. And so, I mean, I think identity politics we saw after 2016 are not that workable. And, a lot of people thought, oh, we've elected an African-American president. Now we'll elect a woman. Next, it'll be this group or that group. And I've heard it described that, that electing Barack Obama was a pause in racism in this country. And we can certainly see there seemed to be like if you pull the rubber band back, we kind of flew the other direction, or at least it brought out a lot of things that we thought may have been gone because we elected an African American president. And um, it, well, you take that and you apply that to what's coming up, and time will tell. Um, Looking ahead at the fact that it looks like there may be the votes in the Senate to um, appoint or to actually confirm a nominee before the election. I just think people should remember that justices change once they get on the court, once they spend the time and over the years. And in addition, there are justices who are conservative on the court who may not be there for that much longer. So we will, as I've said before, shoulder on and be very watchful and see what happens.
Women are rising up, and there is an awful lot of pressure on these senators. So
there is.
We will
there is.
Not just wait and see what happens, right? We will fight every minute between now and if any votes are cast. Jennifer, one thing I want to talk to you about for sure here too is not the U.S. Supreme Court, but what really happens in state Supreme Courts. That's the office that you're running for here. And I got to say, I've gotten very educated on that more in the last year, understanding how consequential state Supreme Courts are. And also what's very empowering to me is the idea is that all this is going on in DC. There's not, we pressure individual senators, but the whole process, it's, out of our hands as voters. We think it should be in our hands, and so it should wait till after the election. But something that is for sure in our hands are all of the local races that we will vote on. In Ohio, early voting starts in just 2 weeks, and
Yes.
We have a month to be voting. And so, I just wanted to hear from you about the significance of the state Supreme Court, the disproportionate. We have much more power over who actually does get into these offices than we do, at our federal level. And then that also, these offices have a disproportionate impact on our everyday lives. But I just don't know if that's something people think about much day to day. But I do think one thing people do think is kind of weird in so many states across the country, certainly true here, is that you can live like on the same street as someone and be in a different congressional district or a different state legislative district. These lines were drawn the way politicians wanted to have them to fit, to make sure they could continue to get reelected rather than actually representing communities. And so with redistricting, with the census happening and how these lines are going to be redrawn, only happens every 10 years. What role will the state Supreme Court play in that, without getting too into the weeds, but just,
Sure.
Just to highlight the significance a little bit of the state Supreme Court?
Well, this election this year is a perfect way to actually vote forward, to think forward, because we're at a perfect storm in Ohio where next year the lines will be drawn for both the legislature and the Congress from Ohio. And it'll be done according to a new formula that is designed to stop gerrymandering, to create districts that are compact and reflect a commonality of community so that the competition occurs in the legislature between people from different parts of the state, but that the person who's representing those people from that part of the state really reflects who those people are. And
what a novel idea.
Yes, what a novel idea. And on top of that, the U.S. Supreme Court has said gerrymandering issues belong in the state courts, not federal courts. So you have the chance to elect a court this year that will be more balanced. There are 7 members on the court. Right now it's 5 Republicans, 2 Democrats. You could elect that court to be 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, or 3 Democrats, 4 Republicans, if only one of the 2 of us is elected. And when that happens, from my experience as an appellate judge with 8 judges when we've been 4 and 4, there is less groupthink, there's more compromise, there's more give and take, and we come out with a better decision that works better for everybody involved, especially the people who've elected them. And how this could change our politics. I mean, we might not have something like a heartbeat bill that has to be taken to court and people be affected up and down. We may not have a legislature that tries to impeach the governor because they don't like the fact that he or she makes people wear masks for public health purposes. There are so many things that could change. And when you get folks into Congress, Um, these people who get elected to Congress are the farm team for who runs for the U.S. Senate, who confirm justices on the Supreme Court, and so much more. So this is our chance to vote forward in voting on these 2 Supreme Court races this year.
All right, Ohio, you heard it here. This is super important. Okay, so there's all of this, U.S. Supreme Court. It's so important. Let's keep that pressure up. But we all get to vote on who is going to be on the state Supreme Court here in Ohio. There are those races, no matter what state you're in across the country. Look it up. See who's running. See who those people running who reflect RBG's values, who, are like Jennifer. And make sure to just, wow, what an opportunity. Actually, to me, it's very empowering to think that, okay, we've lost RBG, but that doesn't mean that there are not women rising up that we can put on the bench that reflect our values. Okay, rapid fire round. We're going to wrap this up with some of my favorite rapid fire questions. You ready, Jennifer?
I'm ready.
Okay. A piece of advice you give your teenage self?
It would be to not take myself so seriously and to laugh at myself a lot more.
Nice. Very good. Your favorite guilty pleasure?
Okay, there's this app on my iPhone called Design Home. I design rooms. So.
Ooh, are you good?
Yeah, I do okay. Yeah, and my granddaughter says, Mima, can I borrow your phone? And so sometimes we don't have enough accessories. I'll spend $1.99 to get her some diamonds so she can buy more accessories to do the rooms. And she's actually won me points too.
Nice. See, you're raising her right. More grandma points right there. Okay, the person you would most want to get a glass of wine with?
Well, do they have to be alive?
No.
Okay.
Could be anyone.
I don't know if he would drink wine or not, except maybe, Thomas Merton. He was a Catholic monk who lived. He was born in France, grew up in New York City, had sort of an artist kind of brain, but then he decided to become a monk in, I think, his 20s or 30s, and he wrote, and he lived at Gethsemane Abbey in Kentucky, and he wrote amazing books. And he died in, I think, 1969 when he was at a monk convention in Bangkok, Thailand. But anyways, I think he would maybe drink wine when they pass the wine and the bread, but I have a feeling he would have drunk wine elsewhere too. And so just to be able to
a show
get
of good
into
character.
his mind. Yeah.
Okay, you'll be shocked to hear that no one has given that answer before.
Oh, probably not, because I'm kind of nerdy.
Oh, Jennifer, we love you for that. Okay. One thing you're grateful for right now?
I am grateful for my family. I'm always grateful for my family. Families can have their ups and downs, but they keep you grounded, and they're something that you live for, and that you hope that you've planted the seeds with the opportunity that you have, with the time that you spend with them, to do good in the world in the future.
Well, nothing like virtual homeschool to remind us of how much we love our family members, and even in times of challenge. Well, Jennifer, it was wonderful to have this conversation with you. I especially really love that you joined us sitting on your exercise ball. I'm also very impressed. It makes me think that in addition to being able to run a very fast mile, that you also probably have like amazing core strength overall. So, all right. Thank you for being here, for talking about RBG's legacy, giving us those values to live up to. So ladies, let's work on our mile and get out those exercise balls and vote for amazing women like Jennifer for state Supreme Court. We got
Thanks for all you do. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so now I get to pass it over to Julie.
Hello.
Hey, Julie, how's it going?
Julie. I'm Gail.
Hi, Gail.
Cheers.
You and your spindrift, that is like your go-to. You need to make the commercial for them. Okay, I'm going to let you guys have a chat about this. We can all just like sit and watch and be so jealous that Gail got to have lunch with RBG. That's She gets to tell the story. It's amazing. Anyway.
So I guess we're going to be talking about Gail's lunch with RBG. With that lead.
This is crazy.
I just want to start by saying good evening to everybody. We're so glad you're still watching. My name is Julie Womack. I'm the organizing director for Red, Wine, and Blue. I am down in the Cincinnati area. I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves. I will let the other Julie go first since, well, she's next to me on the screen. So,
Hi, I'm Julie Collins. I'm an organizer for the Central Ohio area for Red, Wine, and Blue.
Hey
And
guys, I'm Gail Horowitz. Sorry, I'm very new at this. I'm a lawyer up in the Cleveland area. I'm so happy to be with you guys.
well, I just want to start off by saying I always am so inspired when I see these women candidates who are these experienced, strong, smart ladies who are running for office in Ohio. And then to hear her talk about another amazing woman with RBG and all she accomplished for, for women. And it just struck me as to how important it is for like representation in these positions. When Judge Brunner is talking about her work and recognizing that domestic violence victims needed that assistance. I was a domestic violence prosecutor, so I totally do. But I think that's an issue that wouldn't resonate with a lot of men, that just wouldn't cross their mind. And I just thought that is so important. And I don't know, that just really struck me. So I love listening to all these women who are running, and I think we are blessed by so many amazing women in Ohio. So Gail, you did get to meet RBG, so we of course have to hear that story.
Sure. Well, actually, I mean, I've been reflecting on it, and my passion for RBG goes back to my bat mitzvah year when she was appointed to the bench in 1993, not to date myself. But, it was so exciting. I just remember to see this Jewish woman just like me, who just like my mom, just like my grandma, she looked like she could be in my grandma's Maj group, and to be, representing our community at such a high level and doing such amazing work was even to a kid, so inspiring. As I got a little older and went off to college, my passion for her only grew, and I actually ended up writing a term paper about her, and the next semester doing an internship for a guy who covered the Supreme Court. So I was at the court all the time, and somewhere along the line, the journalist that I was writing for, who was himself amazing, said, "Hey, you should write her a note about your term paper." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, people do that kind of stuff." So I did, and so I didn't post this part on Facebook, but she actually wrote me. I brought it. She signed a photograph for me, which was really amazing.
Oh, that is amazing.
Every best wish to Gail Horowitz, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I don't know if you can see it very well, but so I've had that forever. Then a year or two later, I actually went to law school, trying to be a women's rights attorney, just like her, and was able to very, very briefly interact with her when I was volunteering at an event where she was the keynote speaker. So that was also incredible because I kind of just snuck up next to her in the midst of all these people, and I turned, she turned, we were face to face, and I said, told her briefly how much she meant to me and asked if we could have a quick picture. And she, of course, was super gracious. I was really just a kid, and she did not have to be so kind. But the most exciting thing, I guess, came 10 years later when I was about 8 months pregnant or so with my first son. And my mother-in-law called me, Barbara Besser, who was also an attorney. And she said, "Oh, I have exciting news. I've asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg to have lunch with us, and she has agreed." And the backstory on that, yes, I was very surprised. The quick backstory is that my mother-in-law in the 70s had, in her own way, a very Ruth Bader Ginsburg-like start to her legal career. It was at a time when there were not many women attorneys, certainly not many women litigators. She worked for a nonprofit in Cleveland that did only women's rights litigation. So if you read the history of RBG, those types of cases is exactly what was going on here in town. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the board of advisors, and she used to meet frequently with my mother-in-law about her casework. They kept in touch over the years, but my mother-in-law, because she's a a very humble person. Rarely, she would never brag about this connection ever. And so I didn't know that much about it. But long story short, we went to see Justice Ginsburg when, again, I can't stress this enough, I was super, super, super pregnant, but I vowed that I would do whatever it took, even if it meant, pulling over to the side of the road to have this baby, to meet Justice Ginsburg. We had our lunch. It was such a lovely experience. She was everything, you hear people saying, kind, generous. And I think the memory of what she talked about that sticks with me the most is that she was so enthusiastic to talk about having parents working for her, men and women. She could hire anyone like in the country to be her clerks. These are such important jobs. And that she was excited to say how she supported their work-life balance. She was not thrown off at all by hiring people with kids at home. And she really championed that also to her colleagues. And I just thought that was so lovely and amazing. So.
That goes right back to what we were talking about, why women representation matters, right? I mean, totally matters. So, and that's like I said, I think that Judge Brunner, who was just on, would bring all this life experience. She's a mom, she's a grandma, she's been a judge, she's been Secretary of State. And I know that we all want to see strong women elected who represent us, represent our values. So one thing that you guys can do is to get involved with Red, Wine, and Blue is to download the app. It's called Outvote. It's on the screen here. We have a campaign code that you enter. You can see it right there. We actually have an adorable video of Judge Jennifer Brunner being interviewed by this very sweet little girl about voting. So it's something really easy you can send to your friends. And Judge Brunner needs the name recognition. She needs her name out there. This is how you can make a difference. You can literally change Ohio by changing the Supreme Court. Julie, I know we did a bunch of Facebook Lives right after Justice Ginsburg, died. What are you feeling right now about all of what's going on with the Supreme Court? What are you worried about? How did that impact you?
Well, it impacts me because so many. Well, first of all, one of the people that she patterned herself after was Thurgood Marshall, and how he handled the civil rights. He and Charles Hamilton Houston handled the civil rights pieces of legislation in the 50s and the 60s. And they did it incrementally. And that's what she did with these gender rights that we have today. I'm a few years older than Gail, I'm suspecting. And so I remember when I had to wear a dress and pantyhose to work every day when I very first started out in the workforce. And, that's something that you don't have to do today, and that the rules were different. They did not care if you were a mother. You were supposed to be at work. I actually got written up because all three of my kids got sick. And, they don't get sick all at once. They get sick incrementally. And so I was literally on a final because my third child had gotten sick and I had to stay home with that child. And so I was told that I had to have a backup babysitter and a backup to the backup, that I was not to miss any more work. So, I just kind of feel like, seeing her life story, seeing what she went through when she was, in law school, and her husband was in law school, but he was sick and couldn't go. And so she would do her homework, his homework, and take care of a toddler. I mean, she's just an amazing woman. And so what I'm worried about now, though, is losing the freedoms that, she sat there and protected, our rights to be able to choose, the ACA. Not having a pre-existing condition, when that was lifted, when I first was working, if you had a pre-existing condition, you couldn't be insured for like 2 years on your job. And if you got sick with your pre-existing condition anytime in that 2 years, then that just rolled out even farther when you could actually get on an insurance plan. And they blamed everything on your pre-existing condition. I remember having a coworker who had a child with Down syndrome, and the child got a cold, and they denied the claim because they said it was pre-existing. Well, colds are not pre-existing. But they said that because the child had Downs, they were more susceptible to colds. So this is what we will go back to if we lose these protections that we have in the ACA. So that's kind of where, I'm looking at all of these things and looking back over history and seeing, there was a change there's been changes in the courts before, and, how does that impact? But hearing the words this morning on the news from Ted Cruz saying he wanted the law to be legislated on as it was and not new laws created, And that was chilling to me, because think about, in my lifetime, we had the Loving decision.
Right.
We had, which, was for interracial marriage. We've had the Obergefell? But anyway, we had that one for the gay marriage decision. We've had all these decisions that have impacted our lives over the last, 55 years since I've been on this planet, that we don't want to lose any of those things. And some of those laws were definitely new. Some of those laws were definitely changing what had been decided doesn't fit our society anymore. And so it's very frightening to think that, there's some folks who have some kind of caveman, Neanderthalish ideas of life that, that we could go back there very quickly, because this decision, whoever this person is that gets this position, this could literally change the court for the next 25 years. So.
Well, I froze for a second, so I'm glad I came back. But yeah, and I think the one thing that I'd like to touch on before we get done here is, as important as the U.S. Supreme Court is and how we are so worried and focused on that, I'm really glad that Judge Brunner was on tonight, because I can tell you, I mean, I'm a lawyer, I haven't practiced for a long time, but I can tell you the Ohio Supreme Court is amazingly important to your life. Any state Supreme Court, because there may be a lot of things that happen on the federal level, but if they overturn Roe versus Wade, or they do anything around gun violence prevention, I mean, those are going to come back to the state, and then those are eventually going to work their way up to the Supreme Court. So Gail, how do you feel about the importance of the Ohio Supreme Court? What would you want to tell people about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievably important. Just to give a few quick examples, there's two justices on the ballot now who both cast a deciding vote in a recent Ohio Supreme Court case that held that your employer can watch you pee for a drug test. That alone should be disqualifying in my view. They also just held that a juvenile sexual violence victim couldn't be fully awarded the damages that a jury had awarded her. It goes on and on from there. Our Ohio Supreme Court touches on areas of criminal justice, abortion rights, as you mentioned, guns in school. An upcoming case, actually, very soon will be deciding how much training teachers have to carry guns in our children's schools. So it could not be more personal. The one message, we can't get into the weeds with every single voter in Ohio, unfortunately. So the one message that I would try to convey to folks is tell your friends to vote all the way down their ballots. Absolutely. I think Ohio voters, well, I don't know about other states, but it just seems like here people are very unaware about the courts by and large, and very hesitant to vote in judicial races, because they just feel they're just somehow not qualified. You are qualified. You can read up on it, or you can ask a trusted friend and get information quickly. If you are that trusted friend, you need to be broadcasting this message to anyone who will listen, so that folks will actually cast votes in these races.
Because these are the judges that regular people are going to see.
Right.
They're not going to get the opportunity to stand before the Supreme Court, but they will have an opportunity to be in these district courts, these local courts, all the way up to possibly even our state Supreme Court. These are the judges that are going to affect you first.
100%. And I like what you said about trusted friend, because that is exactly what Red, Wine, and Blue is all about. We will give you content. We will give you videos and things you can share with your friends through the app, through the Outvote app. And you are going to inform them in a really funny, non-political type way. But these down ballot races, I mean, Trump and Biden are going to fight it out, and we are definitely, going to do all we can on that. But these down ballot races really have an impact on your life, and people don't follow them. So you can definitely inform your friends, and we help you do that. And we have this collective power. There are so many women who are using this app, who are in our Facebook groups. We get together, man. We can make humongous changes just by talking to our friends. And it's just so important. I hope everybody pays attention to that. So our time is up, and I want to thank both of you guys for coming on. I want to thank Judge Brunner for coming on. I really enjoyed hearing her stories, and I'm excited to see her on the ballot in November. So Julie and I have her wine. You can get your Spindrift there. And
Love you.
Good night, everybody.